We'll make a start, I think, and kia ora and welcome to everyone today to our August ARANS webinar. So today we have Ruth Larson and Gabrielle Faith from Ngai Tahu Archives, and they're going to offer a records management and archival perspective on integrating a trusted digital repository into their existing archival database. So, without further ado, I shall hand over to Ruth and to Gabrielle to tell us more about that. So, okay to do that? We've got people. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alison. Kia ora koutou. Ko Gabrielle Faith tōku ingoa. He uri o Ngai Tahu Ngāti Kahununu hoki. I am an archivist in the Ngai Tahu archive team. We are located in Ōtautahi, Christchurch. Ruth Larson, Records Manager at Runanga o Ngai Tahu, and myself will share with you our experience of integrating an exciting new tool into our archival management system, a trusted digital repository or TDR. From my non-technical perspective, a TDR is essentially a simple yet important tool which auto-updates digital assets to the latest formats to prevent them from becoming unreadable, therefore obsolete. This proactive approach to ensuring our digital data's long-term safety, preservation, and continued accessibility means the Ngai Tahu Archive is front-footing best practice for digital archives. And this new technology ensures that we are continuing to safeguard our knowledge for future generations. Today I will talk with a focus on the long-term preservation of digital archives, and Ruth will go more deeply into the technical IT aspects of the TDR and its usefulness in terms of records management compliance. I'd firstly like to give some background for the Ngai Tahu Archive for those of you who aren't familiar with us. I'm just hearing a little bit of feedback. Can everybody just mute their microphone? Sorry for being intercutting there. It was just a little bit off-putting. Thank you. And anyway, back on track. In 1978, the Ngai Tahu Māori Trust Board supported the establishment of the Ngai Tahu Archive. So we are a fairly long-standing archive, entering sort of 50 years coming up. The first deposited collections were based at the University of Canterbury in a partnership with the Māori Studies Department and the University Library. In the decades following, a small number of other collections were added, the largest being the collection of the Ngai Tahu Māori Trust Board itself, which measures approximately 100 linear metres now. Work on inventories, collection maintenance and development was undertaken in a piecemeal fashion as fixed-term contracts and funding allowed. This long-standing commitment to an archive and collaborative approach to its management illustrates the pragmatic iwi approach to preserving our historical memory. In 2011 and 12, the Ngai Tahu Archive was invigorated with the appointment of two permanent kaimahi, Takarei Norton and Tania Nutira, both of whom are actually still with the team as Archives Manager and Senior Archives Advisor. A governance board was also established at this time, Te Pai Korako, who provide us with expert guidance and decision-making power. Long-standing Ngai Tahu Archive champion Tatipini O'Regan was the inaugural chair and is still chair today. A robust archive strategy was developed around the same time to set the scene and aspirations, and following the appointment of Senior Archivist Jill Dooney, a collection policy was implemented to guide the archive into the next phase of its growth. The team continued to grow in strength and numbers, and exciting projects were started, such as the cultural mapping of place names and photograph wānanga to add individual names and event details to our large photographic archive. Next slide, please, Ruth. In 2017, the Cultural Mapping Project website and Place Names Atlas, Kahuru Manu, was launched. And in 2019, the Archival Records website, Kariao, was launched with a large number of photographs, its primary focus at that time. These websites have grown significantly since their first versions, and I encourage you to explore these following our talk today. Next slide, please. In 2020, the Ngai Tahu Archive team moved from the main office of Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu to the Archives New Zealand building in Wigram, Christchurch. We entered a new phase of development with continued team growth, an international standard facility to work in, and a professional team of Archives New Zealand colleagues to work and learn alongside. The archive collection that until this time had been located at the University of Canterbury was able to be relocated to this facility. For the first time, the Ngai Tahu archive team was on site with our own collections, and this allowed in-depth research, arrangement and description enhancements, and digitisation to occur. Our co-location as lessees within a Crown Agency building again illustrates the practical and pragmatic Ngai Tahu approach in harnessing opportunities to further our iwi aspirations and exercise tino rangatiratanga. Next slide, please, Ruth. Our collections are sourced from both individuals and the organisational arm of Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu, and they come in all formats. We've got maps, audio tapes, artworks, taonga, personal papers, and original manuscripts, through to historical photographs, early Ngai Tahu Māori Trust Board correspondence, annual reports, submissions, and a huge amount of evidence gathered for the Y27 claim. Our paper-based collection now measures over 400 linear metres of archival materials. We also seek the digital repatriation of archives of tribal significance held by external institutions, allowing the original to continue to be held elsewhere, while the Ngai Tahu archive collects a copy. We then create a researched record with a Ngai Tahu focus and flavour, allowing us to tell our stories the way we want. More recently, we have also begun transferring digital-born Ngai Tahu office records into the archive, and Ruth will talk us through later on more about our first transfer of these records. Next slide, please, Ruth. This image shows the Ngai Tahu Māori Trust Board collection, a collection which spans from the 1920s right up to the 90s, until the establishment of Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu following the settlement, during the settlement of the Ngai Tahu claim. The Ngai Tahu archive has a large number of other corporate records, paper records, including the working papers of the first Chief Executive of Te Runanga, Sydney Boyd Ashton. It is important to note that until earlier this year, no other office corporate paper or digital-born records had transferred into the Ngai Tahu archives since 1996. To deal with this backlog, both the paper-based and electronic records of the Te Runanga group is the current collection focus of the Ngai Tahu archive. Next slide, please, Ruth. The archival management system used by the Ngai Tahu archive is Manaisys. This is a Canadian-based information management technology developer, and they have a focus on customisable tools within best practice archival, museum and library systems. It was really important to Ngai Tahu archive to choose an off-the-shelf management system so we could count on continued support and development. Alongside Manaisys support, we have expert tautoko from John Truesdale, Digital Information Management Specialist, who's based here in Christchurch at Computer Concepts Limited. In 2023, Manaisys introduced us to their newest development in the form of their Trusted Digital Repository, or TDR, developed to integrate seamlessly with the other tools we were already familiar with. My understanding and the following explanation of the TDR comes from a non-technical archivist's perspective, while Ruth will go more in depth about the technical aspects of the tool later on in the webinar. Next slide, please, Ruth. In a nutshell, a TDR is a tool which automatically updates digital files to their latest formats. We feel lucky that Manaisys had already been working on their proprietary version of a tool like this, and in 2024, when we decided to integrate it, the integration was relatively seamless. As the TDR was an offshoot product within a system we were already familiar with and trusted, it felt the next logical phase of development for the Ngai Tahu archive, as we all come to grips with this digital-born asset world. Another factor in our decision to uptake the TDR was its ability to assist us in dealing with the large influx of the amount of digital-born office records about to be transferred over to us here in the Ngai Tahu archive. The main benefit of a TDR is to avoid what we call the floppy disk syndrome, whereby file formats become unreadable or completely unusable as time goes on. Manaisys provides continuous upgrading of file types alongside constant innovation to ensure the TDR will always be at the forefront of digital file longevity. Another important aspect for us here at the Ngai Tahu archive was the ability to add layers of security to the digital files within the TDR. We can customize which team users can access any file, if the file will link to the archival record or not, and no file auto-populates on our website Kariao without us unlocking it, so to speak. As it is a background tool, whānau and other Kariao users don't actually see any changes when using Kariao, but in the background it's working hard and doing exactly what we tell it. Next slide, please, Ruth. This slide shows, in a really simplified version, kind of our three-step TDR workflow, right from asset identification through to file ingestion and finally linking the file to archive records. The TDR has entered our business as usual mahi relatively easily. While we had to unlearn one way of connecting digital records and relearn another, which did include an additional ingestion stage, which was new to us, the process ends up faster than our previous way of connecting digital assets to archival records. Because the TDR is designed to work seamlessly with our existing products, we could stop certain workarounds, and we have found as we become more confident in the TDR environment, our mahi does flow better. We still, of course, build many records that have no digital asset attached, i.e. we still describe many solely paper-based records, but the TDR allows for digital-born records to more seamlessly and safely exist alongside. Next slide, please, Ruth. This slide shows in more technical detail the steps taken to get a digital asset into the TDR and out into the world. I wanted to just highlight the focus on security and safe access throughout each stage. An important aim of the Ngai Tahu archive is to facilitate managed access to mātauranga Ngai Tahu for whānau hapu iwi, and as an added bonus, the wider Haporian world. We can manage this access more safely using the security layers built into the TDR, and Ruth will expand on this a little bit later in the webinar. And next slide, please, Ruth. This slide shows an example of a record from our first pilot transfer batch of the digital-born Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu office records. The top left image shows our Monisys database where we build all the metadata into the record. The bottom image shows the TDR storage space of the digital document, and the top right image shows the connected links in the record. This example is a record that is restricted, so no Kariao website record exists. We have a traffic light system to manage our restrictions, and this record is marked as a red light, and Ruth will explain this further on in the talk. Assigned restrictions are easy to manage using the layers of security, both in the TDR and in the wider Monisys environment, which was an important consideration for us. And that's it from me. I'll now hand over to Ruth, who will talk us through the records management space at Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu and her experience as records manager of transferring digital-born office records into the Ngai Tahu archive using this tool. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora, thanks, Gab. Kia ora koutou, as Gab just said, my name is Ruth Larson and I am the records manager at Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu. My background is more IT-based, working for various local government and Crown subsidiaries. To understand how important the TDR is in a records management context, we need to take a quick tour of the history of record management at Te Runanga o Ngai Tahu. As already highlighted, corporate records were created during the settlement period. Uncovering information makes records, making business-altering decisions makes records, and exchanging tonga and iwi-affected data makes duplicates of records. As the organisation grew, so did its complexity. Records went from the central office to various holdings and subsidiaries, and to Runanga as they developed their own legal identities. More activity meant more records, both hard copy and electronic. Then came the earthquakes. Anyone who's done records management in Canterbury knows the classic approach: sweep the desk and dump the boxes at Iron Mountain or TIMG. Need I say more? And finally we had COVID, bringing with stealth rollouts of M365 across various organisations, with often no architecture, no taxonomy, no governments, and this means records in every corner, all over the place. So the result? We have over 30 years of records, 7,000 plus boxes, deteriorating media, mixed cloud and local storage, no disposal criteria or access controls for much of that content, Add to that low IT and IM literacy, and very little formal records management has taken place. To understand the real gravity of this, as an example, this means at the disposal and appraisal stage, we have to review every single document, not at a box level or at a folder level, every single document. And each box and folder, both electronic or hard copy, could cover an environmental survey, legal proceedings about something totally different, and tax invoices for stationery, all in one order. Hence the graphic, because it feels like a bit of a tidal wave sometimes. At this point, I want to tautoko Julia Moore, who was the previous record manager. Julia established the retention and disposal schedule, which was a firm kind of stone in the path to records management at Te Runga o Ngai Tahu. And I want to thank her for that because it means I don't have to do it. And I've got a good stepping stone to work off. So with that much data, we need a proper plan, particularly, and I'm talking at the archival appraisal stage. As a charitable trust, Te Runga o Ngai Tahu isn't actually legally bound by any records acts. So for me as a records manager, it's all carrot, no stick. In additional context, because of this, we've decided to take records management from an IT centre to me actually sitting with the archives team, because this is the ultimate goal. Our records from the business will go to the archives. I do spend my time split between two, but this decision was to help keep in mind the eventual home of the archives. With all this context in mind, I made the decision when I arrived here to treat our records as if we were a local government agency. This is reflected in our retention and disposal schemes, our lifecycle recommendations, and even requesting a sponsor sign-off at the disposal stage. I'd like to acknowledge Algum and DIA at this point as well, who only slightly raised an eyebrow when I gave them plans of what I want to do and if we can be involved in sponsor and local government sign-offs at Hui, and I thank them on that space. So to highlight the real difference now for Te Runga o Ngai Tahu in terms of our records is that instead of going to Archive New Zealand, our records will be going to the Ngai Tahu archive, but our processes are pretty similar now. If you remember what I said above, there was very loose permission access and controls. So there was an ad hoc system at appraisal stage was developed in terms of security and who could access what content. Access was creatively determined by a traffic light system, with red being highly confidential, yellow needing review of who wanted to view it, and green were happy for all whānau to view. This is because, again, the right access settings and the right permissions weren't applied at the creation stage of that document lifecycle. So we have a process of how we want our archives to be, but we don't have any metadata. Our content is often old and outdated, with even opening a Word document can be a real struggle. We are dealing with dozens of formats across multiple platforms. So the appraisal stage is not only a real struggle to read the format, but actually how we're going to transfer it into a trusty format for other people to view for the archives team. But as Gabs mentioned, the TDR allows us to ingest material in these various formats and can update them. So the issue for Naomi isn't how to convert the records for the archive, it's just making sure I can open the records, which at that kind of appraisal stage has saved quite a lot of time and helped speed up a really time-tight process of deteriorating media, as I'm sure a lot of records managers here will be aware. A really good example is what we call our OTRONT records, which is from an old 2012 server. We had kind of old, like 1993 Word documents to early 2000s Word documents, so I was having to have different formats and types to open them, but it meant as soon as we ingest them into the TDR, they all look like the same PDF format and easy to read and access. So what is the Trusted Digital Repository, or TDR? I'm going to give a very simple tech overview, and I also want to apologise to my BA and Visio experts in the room for my very simple flowchart. So we will start at number 1 with the user, and we will use the lovely Gab as an example. She's going to catalogue some new digital content. She'll be working in the main database, or Monesis, which holds all of our descriptive metadata, so title, creator, date, all that kind of other important information about the asset. However, the actual digital file will no longer live there. What will happen is it will be ingested and go into the TDR. When it arrives in the TDR, what is called a preservation package, or API, is created. This package includes the original file along with other critical, technical, and preservation metadata, such as checksums, file history, everything to kind of ensure its authenticity and integrity. At the same time, the TDR creates a unique identifier, a URI, because we love an acronym, for that specific asset. This identifier is what links the digital asset back into Maniasis for a main database. So while the main database now holds the descriptive metadata and a pointer to the TDR actually now holds the main file and its preservation package. When an end user needs to access this digital asset, whether it is one of our researcher members of our team or a whānau member that interact with the Maniasis web interface, or MWI. The MWI is a public-facing access portal. It queries the main database, uses the unique identifier to request the correct file from the TDR, and retrieves it. The TDR then delivers a user-friendly version of the asset for viewing or downloading, whatever we say, to the end-user interface. The end-user interface, though, is what our kariao is, which Gab has already described previously. This is the final step where the user can view, download, and utilize the asset. The best part is that the original master file remains untouched and secure in the TDR, while we serve a copy to the user. Again, I'd like to highlight security at this point. Whether in Maniasis or TDR, we can lock down security and access as per that traffic light system I just described. For example, we can have a record that we can make available to everyone, or we can maybe just give it away what we call an information card. So you know that record exists, but you can't view it. Or you would never know it exists and it sits in Maniasis. We can also lock it down to team members. So perhaps if it's highly confidential, maybe it's only a record that myself or my manager can see and not for the rest of the team. Another point to highlight is that this is currently a hybrid model, with kariao and TDR being cloud-based products and Maniasis on local servers at CCL, which Gab has also mentioned. We're looking at moving Maniasis to the cloud with the new data centre in New Zealand and with the second one being in Canada. As I said earlier, TDR, from a records management perspective, is getting us closer to the PRI compliance of how we want to manage our records here. Records can now be structured, complete, and accurate with metadata management in place. Audit trails and permission controls can be activated for what we want and what we need. Traffic light system protects sensitive or restricted records from unauthorized access or alteration. So meaning that we can kind of say that we're upholding that statement in the PRA of creating and maintaining full, accurate, accessible records as part of normal business, enabling accountability and long-term preservation, with long-term preservation being a key facet of this project. So what's our future plans and aspirations? Well, as we've kind of added from this discussion, from an archives perspective, it means we have access in all forms, but from a records perspective, it allows us to see where the Tongan's final resting place is, so to speak. Because we now know where the Tongan's final resting place is and what requirements it needs, it means that we can go backwards and we can reverse engineer EDRMS to match what the archive system will be. The ultimate goal, probably looking at API integrations between our chosen EDRMS and the TDR, with quarterly accessions happen automatically. At this point, it will likely be something like SharePoint, but a final decision hasn't been made on that yet. Although it's worth noting that this is a new system, so there will be trial and error, both technically and internally, as we organise our processes. Also, this isn't a static system. There's plenty of room to adapt as it and grow, both in terms of the archives team and Maniasis and the different offerings they will give us. I would like to also kind of flag from a professional standpoint, this has actually been a fantastic experience working more in the archival space within the records management lifecycle. I think very often as record management professionals, we kind of more start at that creation sharing phase at the start of our life cycles. So to really strengthen my skills at the end of this life cycle and actually working with archival professionals has been a real pleasure. And if available to any of you, I do highly recommend it. Our final and ultimate goal is to assure access for our runanga, whether it's to get them on our systems, to show them what we've done and help them set up our own systems, ultimately, we want to support, enable, and empower them and to uphold our whakatauki for our children and for our children's children. That's me. Any questions?
Oh, there we go. Great, thank you both very much indeed. That was a really interesting talk, and and very enlightening as well about sort of the TDR and all the sort of issues that have come to light. And yes, do we have any questions? Anyone would like? Let's have a look. I've got one in the chat. Let me have a look. Here we go. First one is, how does data sovereignty work with Canada?
We did do a kind of taking bets that the data sovereignty question would come up. I'll get Gab, I'll kind of start with my bit and then I'll get Gab to kind of probably give a fuller answer. At the Ngā Tahu Archive, we've taken a pragmatic approach to data sovereignty. And as we've kind of highlighted here, our main goal is actually to get information to Ngāi Tahu whānau, and let them have access to their kind of whakapapa and their history. So that does mean having at points cloud storage. The reason that Canada was chosen was because it's part of the kind of, I guess, Commonwealth umbrella of law, which is again quite similar. And I would like to say that, our legal team, Takare Norton, our manager, went through that contract line by line to make sure that that was done on our terms. Anything you want to add to that, Gab?
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit. So we do still have a local server here as well, which has some data. But I just wanted to also point out that a lot of our digital records actually do exist elsewhere. So I think I mentioned briefly in the kōrero before about what we call, we've termed digital repatriation, where the Ngai Tahu Archive actually just holds copies of a digital asset, whether that's an artwork, a notebook, a photograph from, say, Alexander Turnbull or the Hocken. And what we do is we do have a record within our system and we try and wrap it up in a Ngai Tahu storytelling approach. So what we do is we kind of exercise kind of our tino rangatiratanga over that data in a way that sits with more of our Tahu storytelling. So we're able to add all sorts of things. So a lot of our records are actually already elsewhere. We just have a copy. Canada's been really great to deal with. Manais's team have allowed us, I think we took about 4 months or so to actually work through the contract and make sure that it fitted us, and that the other really important thing within a contract is having a robust exit strategy. So we do have that written in there. If at any stage we need to pick up our data and get out of there, we can do that. So I think there's always a balance between appetite and risk. But at some point you do have to find a practical solution down the middle and go with your gut and create the safety nets that you can within the constraints of the world. And it's just a matter of taking it step by step and that exit strategy being there in the background. So hope really we answered that one. Okay.
Okay, and another one we've got, has there been any file type the TDR cannot handle?
I can jump in there, Ruth. Yes, plenty. So what happens is when it can't handle something, it kind of spits the dummy and tells us, and we tell Canada, and they build in the code to then handle that file type. So examples of that are usually like raw camera data file types. So a lot of photographers have their specific cameras set, to their own requirements. So it's often that type of thing, sort of old app survey type files. But we haven't found anything that Manaisys isn't able to code for us, and eventually the file can be popped in there.
Thank you. Another one we've got in the chat is talking about the quakes. Was there a disaster response plan that took into account the potential scenario? Sorry, took into account that potential scenario. So did you have a disaster plan about a potential
It
earthquake?
was part of the contract with Maniasis, and also because our local server is at CCL, their disaster recovery plan is also part with that. And then we obviously work with our IT team as well, depending of what kind of disaster is, and let them aware of kind of the technical requirements as well.
And the question is, what happens to the physical copies once they've been ingested into the TDR?
I can answer that one, Ruth. So mainly what we're talking about here is digital born assets. I see she said ignore this
Okay,
question.
yeah, all right.
Good.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, here we go. Is the retention and disposal schedule completed? And if so, is it publicly available?
She is a work in progress. I don't know why I gave it a female gender, but she is a work in progress. Is it publicly available? Oh, no, but I could make it. Let me get back. Let me get back to that person, and I will. Yeah.
That's Olivia. Got that in the chat. Okay, here we go. And here we go. This is from Michael. Curious if the TDR keeps previous versions and creates access copies, i.e. new file formats, or just replaces old file formats. Pros and cons of whichever one it does.
I can jump here. It's my understanding that it keeps the original first old file format, I suppose, and the access copies are the formats that it updates so that it's always accessible that way. But there will always be that original file sitting there as well. As to pros and cons, I'm not entirely sure still whichever one it does. I don't quite get that bit, so I'll leave that piece hanging.
Okay, another question from the chat is, was there any other digital preservation systems that you've considered before going ahead with Maniasis TDR?
We did briefly look at some. I think it's kind of a no-brainer for us because we were already with Maniasis and very familiar with the other products in their suite of products. We trusted the firm, we had lines of communication open, and the TDR was built specifically to work with the existing database systems that we had. So it was always kind of going that way. Yeah.
Last one I've got in the chat is, when ingesting data, is there any checking of the metadata to ensure it aligns with the context of the data?
Not quite sure about the wording of that, but the ingestion of the data there. So there is a spreadsheet that is compiled based on the appraisal. And so the ingestion of the data is actually just putting it in the right fields. And it does produce some of its own metadata, but yeah, most of it's done at a kind of our level.
Yes, and if we want to add any context to what the digital asset involves, whether it's a memo or a plan or a submission, we have that opportunity to build that into the record as well. There's still some creativity involved, despite this being a very technical based chat of ingestion and auto updates. We still have a human touch on all of this.
Is there anybody who'd like to ask a question or wants? Here we go. You mentioned the interface was more accessible to the end user, and I was wondering what that entailed. So does that mean the records are described in a different way that is more accessible to iwi and hapu?
That would be more in terms of the file format. So it means that it's not the original stagnant file format. So as I kind of gave the example earlier, if it was an old Word format, that would be up to the archives team to convert that to either to a PDF or a new Word format. And so everyone may not have that reader, for example, where updating it to a newer format makes it more readable and accessible that way.
And yeah, just responding to that one. If you missed the presentation or you want to watch it later, the link will go out in our next alert. That's the ARANS newsletter. And then after that, they are uploaded to the the ARANS website. So there's a page on the ARANS website. You can go and look at the previous webinars. Okay. Oh, another question from Olivia. Okay, yeah. And Olivia just asked she'd like to know or would love to know, understand the traffic light framework, if that's okay.
How long do we have? So yeah, so essentially, as I highlighted, our older documents in so it's essentially just classification and permission access. So our older records didn't really have, as it comes to the archive, we don't know what the permission access was, who had access to what, etc. So when I'm appraising it, I'm giving it the criteria from the retention and disposal schedule, but I'm also kind of making a judgment call of, is this private and confidential information? Is this IP for the iwi or for a Runanga? Is this something that would be able to be accessed by everyone, or is this something that we're happy to say, we have this record, but we would like you to come and talk to us first so you can understand the context of this record and where it comes from. And so that private and confidentiality stuff sits with a red traffic light. The come and have a conversation with us sits at that amber or yellow level, and then everything else is kind of at that green level.
Thank you. Great. Oh yeah. Olivia was just asking Joe was just asking the chat about connecting the system to SharePoint and said, yeah, if you get onto that point, you could share more, another webinar maybe next year, hopefully. Okay.
Yeah, if I can work that fast, yep.
That one, thank you. I was very keen on SharePoint. Right. Okay. Anybody else got any more questions that they would like to ask, either in person or in the chat? I did have one. Can I just ask myself, how long did it take you to from the point that you decided to start using the TDR to sort of the point you've got to now? How long has it taken?
A good long time. So we first had a presentation from Monesis in 2023 where they sort of introduced us.
Okay.
And that was the point where we stopped and considered other systems, how it was going to work for us. And in 2024, so sometime last year, it was integrated into our suite of products. Mm-hmm. And from then until kind of March was our first transfer of the digital born office records. We were training, learning, practicing, figuring out which formats it couldn't ingest, asking them to build that code in, basically troubleshooting. And then now we feel we're sort of shakily fledged in the system. So it is, and Ruth did say that it is still a work in progress. So yeah, with any new system, there's a lot of learning going on. Yeah, a lot of new technical jargon for me to learn too. It's been fun moving from a paper-based archives perspective into a more digital space has been a really good challenge.
Cool. Thank you. Oh yeah, just say that. And just one more thing, yeah. Leah's just written, just for you, Ruth, that they also find the intersection between archives and records management really interesting. So yeah, cool. Great. So anybody got any more questions? Okay. Just says to me to thank you both very much for coming along for a very interesting presentation. And yes, if you've got any questions, maybe you might take them later. Yep.
Yeah, do feel free to reach out either to myself or to Gab if anyone does have any questions.
Absolutely. We're both happy to be contacted.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll be in touch about the next webinar shortly. Okay, thanks a lot.